or in the back. You see that you kind of have two peaks present, dominantly around 10.5.
Well, that's actually good for age, isn't it?
In the posterior, sometimes we'll see slowing in alpha frequency as an age-related development, essentially, as well. But you do also see a little bit, maybe 8.5 hertz activity posteriorly. So I'm seeing actually two frequencies posteriorly for you in alpha. One is certainly more dominant than the other. Dual alpha frequencies, I will say, is not always an uncommon thing for me to see, but if I see two frequencies, I at least want to see it synchronous across the brain. So again, using that radio station analogy, at least you're still having that communication across the brain where all three regions are playing the same radio station instead of it being maybe just two regions playing. And so interestingly, this 8.5 hertz in the back has actually kept you to be more synchronous with the front and the middle, because you can see dominantly your alpha activity in the front and central part of the brain are more of an 8.5 to 9 hertz frequency range. Although you do have a little bit of 10.5 centrally, but you see you don't have that 10.5 hertz frontally. So that 10.5 hertz activity is only posterior and central at this time. So while I don't know what your response would be with MERT, if you even do respond, I'd be curious to see what, if any, alpha reorganization occurs, whether there would be organization toward a more synchronous, maybe 8.5 to 9 hertz frequency, or whether you'll start to develop faster frequency closer to this 10.5. Only time will tell on that one. But it's interesting because you have those two frequencies. You essentially were seeing less of that faster. We're not seeing that faster frequency present in the front.
Say that again.
We're not seeing that faster alpha frequency present in the frontal region of the brain. As we see it a little less so centrally than we do posteriorly.
Okay.
Yeah. Outside of alpha 2, seeing some differences than expected, I would see dominantly here in delta theta. You can see the line is elevated and not flat like we're expecting. So again, you're not sleeping during the recording. Deep sleep or first stages of sleep, which is your delta and theta. Since we are seeing neurons firing at delta and theta frequencies when you are awake with your eyes closed, it's showing that those neurons are firing slower than expected, kind of like they're sleeping when you're awake, not as fast, because we're seeing that slower frequency activity present when you are awake with your eyes closed. So with MERT, we want to try to speed up that activity, lower this delta theta activity that we're seeing toward that expected flat line instead of seeing it elevated like we're seeing here on the graphs. On the other end, you maybe have a little bit of beta frontally and centrally, not too bad. You can see it's pretty close to that flat line. There may be some neurons that when your eyes are closed are still firing very quickly and then not settling when you're trying to get your brain to settle, but I would call this a minimal deviation from expected. You can see there's just a slight hill here in beta, central and frontal, not really seeing that posteriorly. Essentially with MERT, if there is that response, we want to see movement toward this expected look. Now, even if you're a great responder to treatment, I don't expect your EEG look exactly like this. There's individual variability anyway, but it gives an idea of what we're working towards in terms of movement. Synchronized, organized alpha activity, and then no neurons firing at frequencies either slower or faster.
Okay, so the differences I have from what you would hope to see, are they because of injuries or because of age, or what would be the reason for those?
Can't say, unfortunately. I would say either or both could be explanatory for it.
Both are correctable.
They're both potential triggers for what we're seeing here.
Yeah, and your therapy could potentially correct those.
Or see essentially optimization, so we see a more optimized brain activity. And we always say that it's not just as the EEGs aren't diagnostic, the treatment's not a cure, but we can see optimized movement in brain activity.
All right.
Yeah. One other thing I want to note on your EEG is your voltage. So right here on the y-axis, that 1.3, 1.2, 1.4. Generally on an EEG, the YS voltage is not significant unless we see numbers 2.5 or below, which you can see we are seeing here for you. So that indicates a possible low voltage EEG. This is not a positive or negative thing, it's genetic. Some people are low voltage readers and others aren't. The way I like to think of low voltage is like static on a television. The older televisions, we used to have to turn the knob to make the picture more or less clear for the static. Low voltage is usually more static on a television, so it can be harder to appreciate EEG changes. That's to say, if you were to move forward with treatment, as we would analyze subsequent EEGs, we would always have this baseline to reference back to. And low voltage, I still very often see EEG movement and shift from treatment, but there could be more happening essentially than what we're able to visualize on the EEG just because of that low voltage component. Tendency then is to put more emphasis on the clinical side of things, which to me is the most important anyway. I want you feeling the differences from treatment. And as I mentioned, I have seen plenty of times low voltage readers, we see clear responses on the EEG, but something to kind of keep in the back of our minds with further analysis or future analysis would be to know that there could potentially be more movement than what we're visualizing here on the report. Questions for me on the EEG?
No, not now.
Okay. How about opening up generally? Treatment, questions, concerns, things I can clarify.
No. Well, our practice would be when we get the report, run it through AI, and I'll spend a couple hours on the computer asking questions. But then I hope that, and I'll draw conclusions from that. I hope that after I go through that process, I'll be able to ask you if my conclusions are correct.
Yeah, I'm always happy to answer questions or concerns or clarifications that come up at any point along the way.
Okay.
In the front, so there is some lack of kind of uniformity and connection.
Okay, and what for these things that we've identified, are those the results of injuries or genetics or passage of time?
Can't say. Unfortunately, causation is not, especially because we don't have serial EEGs for you, say prior to head injuries or throughout your lifetime, so it would be difficult to pinpoint.
Okay,
Specific.
Back to our original question. What is my intrinsic alpha frequency? Is that a number you can give us?
So it doesn't give an indication on the report of intrinsic alpha frequency. For you, I'm seeing two frequencies dominate in alpha, at least middle and back. So your dominant alpha frequency right now in the front is that 8.5 to 9 hertz range.
Front is 8.5 to 9, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
centrally, you're also dominantly at 8.5 to 9, but you are showing a little bit of 10.5 hertz.
Which section is this?
Centrally.
Central.
Mm-hmm.
8.5 to 9, and some 10?
10.5.
10.5. Okay, that's interesting. How about posterior?
Posterior dominant at 10.5.
Which is good, right?
Could be. So synchrony more important than alpha frequency. So your specific frequency, the synchrony is going to be most important. Is it the same frequency throughout? Because everybody has their own intrinsic frequency or where their brain is most comfortable. So really we just want it firing where synchronously across the brain at your intrinsic frequency. But you're also showing posteriorly some activity at 8.5.
Okay, this may be a redundant question, but are you able to tell if I have injury-related causation for some of these issues?
Mm-mm.
No.
Not on the EEG, unfortunately. No.
Okay.
And the scan did not reveal like chunks of brain that lost connections, because like one of the things that after going through these two therapies would be to regain the connections that may have been lost, and that alternate connections would have been built around to compensate for that over time. And so, any of this scan reveal, what can be surmised is going on if you got better synchrony? Would you, is there some indication of strengthening connections or anything like that?
If have a more synchronous brain, you are strengthening connection. And so there is opportunity, based on what I'm seeing on your EEG, there is opportunity, if there is treatment response, to see stronger connection across the brain than what we're seeing right now.
All right, how's my heart-brain coherence?
I'm not heart-brain coherence, I don't know.
Well, there's a measurement of his heart. We had a lead on his heart.
So that's for protocol generation. That we don't get any sort of indication from the lab on heart-brain coherence. The heart rate is to help generate your treatment protocol.
All right. Is there asymmetry between my left and right hemispheres?
So we're looking at front, middle, and back. So we're seeing
not looking left, right.
Not laterally. No.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And how responsive do you think my brain will be to entrainment?
That's one of those where I had mentioned that there are no underlying factors indicating who is more or less likely to respond. So it's one of those we can't say how likely you would be responsive to the entrainment.
Okay, so comparing my brain to what you would to a normal brain, if there's such a thing, am I better or worse? I assume I'm worse because I have a lower hertz.
Yeah, so I'm seeing differences from expected. The delta theta activity being present when we're not expecting it to be there. That slower frequency activity is outside of our expected range. And then there being some disconnect in the dominant frequencies between the three regions of the brain.
And those are things that you can reasonably expect to correct or not?
If there is treatment response, we can see optimization in terms of decreasing slower frequency activity, more synchrony across the brain, potentially change in alpha frequency. If right now you're not at your intrinsic frequency, we can see optimization toward more intrinsic frequency.
All right. And we mentioned cardiology. Do I have to get clearance in order to proceed, or can I proceed as I am? Yeah.
You could proceed as is, especially since you already have a clear kind of cardiac history. It's not anything new. You're not experiencing anything clinically symptomatic, and that you are followed by cardiology. There is nothing that I'm seeing that would contraindicate you being able to move forward. It shouldn't have treatment shouldn't have a cardiologic effect on you anyway. So it's more of for your reference, and the recommendation is to follow up on that, but it's not anything that would negate your potential to start this treatment.
Okay, our current plan. Once you provide the report, we will also provide it to the center in Oregon, which I think you suggest, and we will review it ourselves. And if we feel, unless we have other questions, and my guess is we're going to. So one thing I want to ask you about is your availability to answer them. But assuming that there are no restrictions in our mind, we would probably go to Oregon next week and come back and start within the first week after that your treatment protocol. Is there any reason we shouldn't anticipate that?
I would again just ask the Oregon treatment to be sure that that's not going to interfere at all with the psilocybin.
Well,
treatment.
I think what they're going to say, and we are talking to them tomorrow, is that the psilocybin will either provide new connections or strengthen old connections, and that what we would expect from your treatment is that it strengthens those new channels. Mm-hmm. Is that am I seeing it the right way?
It could. So I will say if there is depending on what the long-term psilocybin effect would be. So say, like, for example, MERT, we can see response within the 6 weeks of MERT, but we can see it typically up to a few months after treatment's completed. We can still see a treatment response from MERT. It would be one of those where you would be overlap if the effects of the psilocybin would be anticipated to continue beyond or into the time that you would start MERT. It can make it harder to differentiate if there is response, which would be the causation for it, positive or negative. You know, when you're doing two new things at once and you're experiencing changes, not necessarily means it can be something that you shouldn't do or can't do. It'll just be something we'll have to keep in mind moving as we move forward. Sometimes, like we had a group come in that did like ibogaine right before they then started.
They went down to Tijuana.
Yeah. So sometimes, at least with those patients, I would see quite an uptick in EEG activity, and then it would kind of sometimes go back a little bit, and there would be some like redistribution back and forth, kind of more so than what I typically see with MERT. So likely we were still seeing an ibogaine effect into the beginning of MERT. So more of that would be something that we would have to keep in mind, but it doesn't in any way that I'm aware of negate the option to do one and then the other. It would just be that overlap and how that could potentially affect things, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I've been to this point relying a lot on AI analysis, and I don't know how reliable AI is. I typically run it through two systems to cross-check one against the other. But what the advice I'm getting is to do the psilocybin, wait about a week, maybe a couple of days less than that, and then start this treatment. And I went through the whole process. I went through, MERT versus, and I forgot what the other systems are, but there are other alternative programs. And the pairing of these two seems to be best under those circumstances, in that particular sequence. I could send you what I have, but it was fairly definitive, at least on AI analysis, and they provide the reasons for it in the backup, that we would do the psilocybin, and then the scan, yours, and then the treatment. So that's probably the track round, unless somebody says something different. We had an initial conversation with somebody in Oregon who didn't know anything about anything. So we're going to have another follow-up tomorrow, hopefully, with somebody who can provide some real information for us.
Yeah, and so as I mentioned, I'll have our team email you a copy of the EEG report so you can provide that to them as well. And then feel free to give us a follow-up after you meet with Oregon tomorrow. I'd be curious.
Yeah, when will we get the report?
I'll let Alyssa know as soon as we hang up to email you a copy of the report. So sometime today.
Okay.
Is there more data in the report than what you showed us?
More data?
Yeah.
That's our general analysis. We do have some head maps overall. Head maps are hard. They're taken with a grain of salt. Feel free to run those through just because we're unfortunately out of time to review the head maps. Feel free to run those through AI and we can schedule a follow-up call on those. Head maps show their relative power head maps. So they show the amount of activity in those different frequency ranges based on expected for your age.
Yeah, we'd like all that, please. All that.
What's that?
We'd like to have all that information, please.
Yeah, that'll be on the report. So, but they're all relative. So if you have, say, more artifact on your EEG, things that cause artifact, movement, muscle tension, eye blinking, that will usually generate more delta activity. So your delta activity will look higher on your head map, and then that needs to be taken from somewhere. So sometimes it will show lower, either maybe alpha activity as a result of increased delta, and then if say you do another EEG the following day where there's no other changes but maybe it's less artifacted, the head map or the heat map could show less delta activity and more alpha activity. So I always say take the head maps with a grain of salt because they can shift from EEG to EEG because they're all relative amongst each other.
Okay, and when we have additional questions, and we'll be trying to be efficient about it. We'll organize our questions and respect your time, but how can we set up another session